So it's that time of the year once again where we need to talk about whether or not Cloud9 lost the offseason. I'm sure this is going to be a big topic of discussion this entire offseason until we actually see play get back underway on the Rift in 2025. But obviously, Cloud9 was kind of behind the eight ball. Cloud9 had a very, very tall task to fulfill going into this offseason with both Jojo Pune and Berserker on the way out. Obviously, for much different reasons. Jojo Pune with the whole drama, whatever the heck situation even ended up unfolding, and Berserker, wanting to maybe take a chance somewhere else, maybe want to move on to the LCK or whatever he's going to decide to do. But losing two players of that caliber, it was going to be hard to have like a great offseason. It was going to be hard to have upgrades on paper because there's not very many players, that are realistically coming to the West or coming to Cloud9 or coming to North America or whatever that are even going to be better than Jojo Pune or Berserker, even individually, let alone losing them both from the same team in the same offseason. And so far, it seems like fans from Cloud9, from what I've seen on Reddit and Twitter and stuff like that, have been pretty, the comment I saw on Reddit was like, I am whelmed by this offseason, by picking up Sven and Loki. And I think a lot of other LCS fans have been pretty critical, and people just don't seem too hyped. People don't seem too excited. And obviously, there is very legitimate reasons for that after Cloud9's struggles in 2024, and ultimately coming up short with what was supposed to be a super team or a super roster, or at the very least, just a very, very talented roster. And now, finding ways to build off that in 2025, it's going to be tough. And, getting a guy in Sven who is very solid. He's a fan favorite. He's a guy who has just consistently performed. He's a winner. He's pretty much just gone and won most places he has been. He's found a way to get things done. But he's also a guy who, at this stage in his career, I know people are going to ask if he's on the back half of his career. Is he washed up at this point? And not to say that he's like washed up bad, but just like, is he a guy who we're really going to expect to go and have like some, insane international performance and really take Cloud9 to the next level and also replace Berserker in a meaningful way? And then you have Loki as well, who, I'm sure most people have never even heard of, but also from what we're hearing from people with more knowledge of the Korean circuit and the Korean leagues and Korean prospects and all that Loki is not necessarily like a blue chip prospect or a guy that people were super, super excited about or wanting or anything like that. And then we hear, some of the different possibilities for Cloud9 and the different rosters that could have been. And also you have to take into account the fact that Vulcan maybe didn't have his best year last year. And, people just all of a sudden have a lot of question marks about Cloud9. And Cloud9 is a team who's accustomed to being the West's like last hope. They're a team who's accustomed to going to Worlds and actually getting stuff done, not just a team that's trying to make it to Worlds, not a team that's not even making it to Worlds at all. So obviously this whole season in 2024 was a big disappointment for a lot of people, but then now seeing the changes they're making for 2025, there's not a lot of, I don't think, people who are excited in a huge way that Cloud9 is going to be turning things around. But again, this is something that Cloud9, it's kind of a familiar situation for them. Cloud9 always seems to not make like the most conventional moves in the offseason. They seem to kind of do their own thing. They seem to have, their own unique scouting, their own unique feel for what players are going to fit best in their organization. And ultimately, at the end of the day, more times than not, Cloud9 has found a way to get things done. That's why we have this meme of Cloud9 losing the offseason, but then, still going to Worlds or still winning an LCS title or still making it to quarterfinals or whatever. And that's how they've gotten this far. But again, with Cloud9 not even making it to Worlds in 2024, there are some people asking, how long the Cloud9 systems are going to last, and if there's maybe a chink in the armor, and if this is, kind of the beginning of some kind of downfall. And I think that's what's really interesting here, because we did have LS actually bringing up something just like this, where he said it appears the TSM Arc has begun. Now, obviously, I know a lot of people are saying, hey, you have to take everything LS says about Cloud9 with a grain of salt, with LS and Cloud9's history and the drama and all the bad blood or, perceived bad blood or whatever between them. But I did think this was kind of interesting, where he is saying, or at least hinting at the fact that he believes Cloud9 could be on some kind of, beginning of the end, like we saw with TSM. Now, you might not know exactly what he means by this right off the bat, and I do really appreciate that he did clarify more on these statements, but I actually think it makes his statements a lot more interesting, whether you agree with them or not. I'm not saying that, hey, Cloud9 is the next TSM or anything like that necessarily, but I do think it's interesting, the topic in discussion. I did want to bring this up as well, because it's a whole other look at Cloud9's offseason and their future. So LS says, for people who are asking or thinking this has to do with Koreans, it doesn't. I had a segment on my stream roughly a year ago that talked about how TSM-esque downfalls begin and certain teams run the risk of it happening. When C9 picked up Thanatos, and when you know about the other top lane considerations were too, it's easy to look at it very similar to how TSM was operating after losing Bjergsen in mid. Generally, when teams are on top for X years in a row, they generally lock up top talent and stars constantly. This is because top talent and top stars want to be on that team. This goes for all top teams in all regions, of course. What this also does is those very top stars also know how to find similar players like them, so suddenly the players sort of become GMs in a way. And I'm also sure it's way easier to recruit when you have some of those top players, you know, like saying, hey, we're TSM, we have Bjergsen, and then also Bjergsen going up to you and being like, hey, don't you want to come play with me? Come play with TSM. You know, it makes recruiting a lot easier. You get the pick of the litter. You get exactly who you want every offseason, and it's a lot easier to roster build when you get your number one choice at every single position, or like a top two choice at every single position or whatever, and you just have kind of great players being like, oh, well, hey, could I come play for you? And LS, again, is hinting at how TSM, once they face that downfall of not necessarily always being able to recruit the players they wanted, obviously they met a very, very swift fate, and things really fell off the rails extremely quickly over at TSM. And again, he's kind of saying, hey, or at least bring up the discussion of could this happen to Cloud9 sooner rather than later as well. The second a top team starts consistently losing, they lose their appeal, and suddenly their top players aren't perceived as top players anymore, so gravity and magnetism to the org is also lost. This is something even Fnatic came scarily close with, arguably, but we've seen it happen to several top organizations in the past who just suddenly lose their appeal, and then it's hard to recover it. TSM is obviously the most iconic org it ever happened to. I'd argue KT in the LCK was actually similar, and even MVP in a weird way. For people who know C9 roster decisions behind the scenes from 2019 to 2024, it's easy to look at certain ones, and now this one. This is a requested acquisition that I can't fathom why, hence the comment. So again, obviously, TSM fans and the TSM organization, when their whole downfall started, you know, they were maybe had a little bit of a denial stage at first and being like, oh, you know, this isn't our downfall. This is just we're rebuilding, or this is just one bad split or one bad year. We're going to bounce back. We've always found a way to bounce back in the past and blah, blah, blah. But you always bounce back until you don't. And then some organizations are built for, figuring out an actual rebuilding phase, or figuring out how to actually, come back from down periods and down times and stuff like that. And some aren't. And I'm not saying Cloud9's not, but it is a different task, and especially when your fan expectations, again, Cloud9 fans have known a lot of success and a lot of winning and a lot of consistency throughout the organization's history, so trying to sell them on some kind of rebuild or going in a different direction, which isn't even necessarily what Cloud9's doing. It's possible, Sven is going to come in and be a beast and have some kind of renaissance to old school Sven. It's possible Loki's going to come in and be a monster right away, but I know there's definitely a lot of people who have their questions and criticisms right away. I did want to kind of take a look at Loki and go into his stuff a little bit more as well real quick before we wrap this video up. I know Loki right now is actually ranked 67 on the Korean Challenger ladder, so that's actually pretty cool. He's obviously a very, very talented player. He's been Challenger forever, it looks like, over in Korea, and he does have very, very nice solo queue stats. You can see here, I know in NA we struggled sometimes, and it was a big kind of problem for the NA mid laners at Worlds, the fact that no one was really playing Yone and Aurora, despite the fact that they were like these OP pick and ban champs, but 61% win rate on Yone with some nice stats, 68% win rate on Aurora, obviously the control mage is 64% on Orianna, so Tristana games in there, maybe not the best. Smolder, really not great stats on Silas so far, but some nice Hwei stats, so playing a little bit of everything, playing all the different styles, being able to play some of those top meta champions that some of the other NA teams were maybe not as able to pull off as cleanly at Worlds this year, so that could be cool. I know Cubby recently apparently did this review of Loki's games as well, and he said so far it seems like early game and laning is very much Loki's weak point. He got kind of gapped in their series against KDF and generally needs help to get through the early game. His team fighting and playmaking are a little bit more strong suit, although he does occasionally have some big positioning errors where he winds up in the middle of enemy CC chains as a Tristana or a Azir. Cubby thinks his weaknesses are easier to fix and his strengths are to teach, but overall he's not super impressed so far. Thinks he has potential though. So again, there's just more people like not being super excited or super thrilled or super hyped up about this Cloud9 roster and these Cloud9 pickups, and that's what I've kind of seen from the whole Cloud9 fan base. Obviously there are some fans who are more enthusiastic than others, but I think the average like LCS fan or Western fan like sees this Cloud9 roster and they're not really scared, they're not worried. I don't think this roster is striking the fear in the hearts of like TL or FlyQuest or competing with them. Now again, obviously championships are not won on paper, so they could definitely come in and surprise us, but at least this time, I don't know, something feels maybe a little bit different about this offseason. Again, is it just because they lost two amazing players in Berserker and JoJo, and no matter who they got, it was going to feel, like a little bit of a letdown? Or is it because maybe Cloud9's going a different direction? Maybe Cloud9 is going for a full rebuild. Maybe it's because they lost so much, spending so much money on JoJo Pune, and now they need to cut back a little bit, or they want to play it safer. Or maybe they just really, really believe in Loki and Sven and believe this team is going to win, 3 LCS championships this year or whatever. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But like I said, up until the season actually kicks off, it's going to be a big discussion whether or not Cloud9 lost the offseason this time. And I'm sure everyone's going to have something to say about that. But that's pretty much it for this video today, guys. Hopefully catch you the next one. Until then, peace. Everything we are doing here at Sheep Esports for the rest of 2024 is powered by Holy. This is an awesome company that makes great tasting energy drinks that also just so happen to be healthier than the competition as well. They sent me this starter set deluxe, which comes with a Holy shaker and then 14 individual servings of Holy Energy, Holy Hydration, and Holy Iced Tea. So you get a ton of awesome stuff for a great price. And if you want to get even better price, check out the first link in the description below. Use discount code SE5 to get €5 off your first order, or SE10 to get 10% off your entire basket. If you guys want to help continue to allow us to provide the amazing coverage of both Worlds and the offseason that you guys know and love, definitely check out Holy, buy some stuff. It would mean the world to us. Thanks.